All right, so I'll turn it over to you, Keith.
All right, thank you. Well, we have the great opportunity here today to chat with the three of the four prize winners in the Sage photography exhibition. And I thought it'd be a great opportunity to um, use the time to get to know each of them a little bit better, get to know their bodies of work in a little greater depth. Of course, each one has one picture in the show, which I chose from what they had submitted, a total of 4 pictures. But I thought it would be valuable for us all to be able to see all 4 of the submissions to, on one level, put me on the hot seat. Okay, from these 4 submissions, why did you pick that one? And I'm willing to, try to answer any of those questions, but also to get a better, richer sense of individual style. Good photographers don't get lucky. They don't make a body of work based on happy accidents. It's a conscious process of building a body of work based on a certain attitude toward materials, toward the world. A very deliberate process of interpreting what's in front of you. And we only truly get a sense of that from some sense of the overall body of work. So hopefully that will be one of the agendas for what we're doing here in the next hour or so. And I hope that we can have a little bit of back and forth with each of our winners, and back and forth between them as well. We hope to see how that works. So, Laura, can we begin with you?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Can you just chat a little bit about your trajectory so far, how you came to photography? I mean, I know a little bit of the backstory, but, and how can you summarize your journey so far?
Yeah, so I started photography in high school, and then I took classes at a local community college, Johnson County, and I basically didn't find anything else I was really excited about. So I continued making photographs, and then I eventually got my BFA from the Kansas City Art Institute.
Mm-hmm.
I took a few years off from school, and I attended a few artist residencies, and the Nelson-Atkins purchased a few of my works, and now I am a grad student at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. So I'm a first year right now, and that's kind of where I'm at. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of your interest in the past has been in landscape work. Can you talk a little bit about why landscape? And I know your admiration for Robert Adams and people like that, but what has driven your choice of subject matter to so far?
Yeah, well, landscape has always felt like a place where I could kind of just like see and appreciate and like be joyful in. There's something about the land that kind of doesn't offer or ask anything of you. You can just kind of wander about and look for those moments of like joy and like beauty from light and like wonder. So like Robert Adams, he is a large influence on me because that's, he tends to appreciate beauty in the land. That's something that I really I do a lot of. So yeah, a lot of my work is me searching for beauty and kind of balancing that with my own circumstances.
And from what I can remember, your working process is deliberately sort of slowed down. I mean, are you still working with a 4x5? So you're working with a view camera, shooting film, and then scanning that film. That is a different process than with a camera just around your neck, walking here, there, and everywhere. What about the physicality of the process? What part of that physicality is important, or why those choices, I guess?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Like you said, I'm shooting with a 4x5 large format camera. I've shot with 8x10 in the past as well. But like having the like ability to carry like this thing over your shoulder and like set it down and like see through that, there's something really like magical about the process of seeing through this box. And I'm kind of starting to mix up my style where I'm shooting less full sharpness and I'm dealing more with like the way light and texture works when it's like shot wide open, or like how does like that affect the way I'm seeing, because seeing through a large format camera is a completely different experience, and it's just really it's really amazing, and I really love it. So yeah.
All right. Well, do you want to show us the 4 images that you submitted? Do you have those?
Yeah, I actually applied with 5, I think.
5. Okay. All right.
I can share them. Let's see. Okay. Oh, well, hold on. Where did my preview go? Okay. So this is the first one, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, since I moved to Lincoln, I've been drawn to the Platte River. So a lot of this work has to deal with like water as this connection to like home and family, and like this search for my own identity, but also like this place where I can reflect on like what's going on in my life, and who and what like family is. So this is footprints in the Platte River, and these are little air bubbles that's just like air forming. So it's pretty amazing and beautiful, and that's underwater.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, and that's another along the Platte River. It's just in the the riparian zone. So
And here you're using that shallow depth of field to play off the sharpness of the foliage against an
yeah.
increasingly soft horizon. Yeah. Oh yeah.
This one was taken in Lincoln, so this is just in my neighborhood, and just like the fleeting of sun, like that's as the sun was setting, so that shadow was moving really quickly. So I was, kind of reacting to that. Sometimes I get so lost by the light that I miss the shot because I'm just like looking at the beauty of it, and then it's gone. And
yeah, that's a beaut.
And this is a portrait of my mom, and I've been shooting around my my house and where I grew up in Silo, Kansas, and this photograph I took, and then I headed back to Lincoln, and later that day she called me and told me that she had a fever. So this was like the day where she started getting symptoms for COVID, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah. And that's the photograph that made it in. So
yeah.
And that was taken in Lincoln, Nebraska as well. So it's just a neighbor. And I was walking by and noticed like the light, cascading through this quilt or this blanket, and it was just like really beautiful. And yeah.
This one has a wonderful Wright Morris kind of quality for me.
Sure.
But yeah, it really is great. The textures, the geometric rhythms, and the play of light. It's interesting how different structurally or on some kind of level all 5 of your pictures are, and yet they're all about this sense of a place, a personal sense of time, in the linkage to either a generalized home place or a very specific, your particular home place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right, very nice. Any other thoughts or questions from our other distinguished artists here? Anything else we should mention, Lara? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, were all those photos that we saw taken with the 4x5?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I primarily shoot with right now is 4x5. Yeah.
Are you making silver prints at all? Or you're scanning everything?
I'm scanning right now. I am planning on getting into the darkroom this semester, so I'm looking forward to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it has not happened yet.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking from experience, I can just say be prepared to waste a couple boxes of paper before before you get where you want to be.
Yeah,
But,
I've never used the type and enlargers they have here, so there'll be some learning curve as well.
yeah. Well, all right, excellent. Thank you, Laura. That's great. Really terrific body of work, and I have some inkling of how that has been building on the last several years, and it's really nice to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
Holly,
Yes.
I believe you are up.
So you want my kind of what led me to where I'm at story?
Yeah. Can you give us a little bit of background and history and what your interests have been and how you've gotten to this place?
So for my high school graduation, my parents bought me a really nice camera, and that's basically when I really started to consider photography as a medium. When I went to college, I actually studied graphic design, and then I minored in photography.
Where was that?
At Bowling Green State University here in Ohio.
Yep.
And after graduation, then I worked in the design field for probably 16 years.
Oh.
And photography was always kind of like a sub thing in each job that I had, especially when they found out that I could take photographs, it, got used. But most of it was, at one point I did work for a newspaper, so it was some journalistic type stuff, pictures of bands, pictures of artists. Then for other jobs, it was like, for an employee newsletter, it'd be kind of journalistic style for that, or it'd be like employee photos or product photos type things. I didn't really use it for my own creative. I mean, I always take pictures here and there, but it wasn't until a few years ago, after I had my third child, that I started staying home, and it became like my way of still being creative after I stopped doing design work. So I've kind of been exploring it again. I feel like I've kind of reintroduced myself to the creative side of it again. Since then. So.
Okay. So, and you've been exhibiting and showing for a few years at least, right? For a while.
No, actually, it wasn't until an art friend of mine about 4 or 5 months ago saw some of my photos and said, because my subject matter is my family mostly right now, I didn't know if people would see it as just like, kitschy family snapshots. But my friend saw them and said, you need to share these. You need to show these to people and share them. So I said, okay.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Can you show us the group you submitted, please?
Yes. And I also had 5. Okay. So I will, here they are. Okay, so this is the noodle art one. Can you guys
Yeah.
see my image okay? Yeah. So
Yep.
this is the noodle art one that was in the show. And as I described, so currently this body of work, I'm exploring like my experience with motherhood, but also like since being home with my kids all of the time, I've been able to really kind of observe them more than probably I ever would have. You know, they're not at school all day, they're not at activities, they're not over at their friend's house, they're not visiting family that much. So I really get to observe them every day, all day, like how they handle each other and just interact with their toys and things at home, and in this case, food. And so I'm exploring like the duality I feel both as their mother, but then also as the observer of their actions. So in this case, it was, oh my gosh, she's making a mess. Like she's not eating her dinner. I'm going to have to clean that up. And anyone who's cleaned up noodles knows that's not fun to clean up. But also the observer side of me is like, wow, like she looked at her noodles on her plate and thought, I can make a picture with that. I can make art with that. So I was amazed by that as well. So that's kind of what my image is.
I mean,
so here is
a natural.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, a natural question is that these are all so beautifully orchestrated within the frame, which I think is some reflection of your graphic design background. And it doesn't matter really to the nature of the picture, but how much orchestration, how much intervention on your part are we seeing in most of these images?
I try to do zero,
Wow.
if any, intervention,
Okay.
because I use photography as kind of like a documentation and a way to reflect on what I'm viewing. So I don't want to manipulate what I'm viewing, and I don't also want to manipulate what the viewer is seeing. I just want them to see exactly what I saw. So all of my images are minimal, if any, intervention in them.
Okay.
I try to just take exactly what you would see if you like walked in my house or peeked in the window.
Right.
So here's my daughter and my younger son. So school at home, he has to do, you know, all the schoolwork at home, including gym class, which this gym class this week was doing something with lifting weights. And my younger daughter, they would be at school and she would be home with me still 1 year, but she gets to see them do their schoolwork. So she feels the need to always be involved as well, because she thinks she's big just like they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then fortunately, and or unfortunately, however you want to say it, potty training was a big thing for my youngest one during this time. And she's extremely ornery, as you can see on her face. And she was very, very stubborn about this entire process, everything about it. And she would constantly destroy the toilet paper to the point where we had to take it out of the bathroom when she was in there. But I had gotten this People magazine right after RGB had died, and I'm like, I need to like have myself in there, because that's what I would do initially, was wait with her, like reading a magazine about another strong-willed woman while waiting for my daughter, a strong-willed girl, you know, to do what she's supposed to do. So so that one, I guess, me sitting in there was a bit of the plan, you know, that part was planned, but the scene of my daughter was not unusual.
So you put the camera on a tripod and then went back and forth?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. In fact, I had a little remote thing in my hand that you can't see.
Got it.
Okay. So this one, back to my daughter wanting to be like the boys. So we have some neighbor boys too that are the same age as my son. So in the background, you can see my oldest son and a neighbor friend on their trampoline in the backyard. And then my daughter can't go on the trampoline when they go because she's too little and they jump too rough. So what she does is she just stands along the perimeter there and just watches them. So this one I call like no little girls allowed. Yeah, it's like she's giving them a guilt trip to let her be on there.
Yeah.
And plus the light in this one was just so beautiful. I couldn't
Yeah.
not take that picture. So.
Yeah, this one seemed different to me from the others because of the outdoor setting and this incredible
Yes.
subtle backlight and looking through the screen of foliage and so forth. But it's a terrific picture.
Yeah, nature definitely played a big character in this image for sure. And then this one is called Homeschool Hangover. And this is like a typical morning of attitude with my boys on schoolwork. You know, the older one is kind of to the point where he's like, Mom, leave me alone. I can do it myself. And then my younger one just wants to go back to bed instead of do schoolwork. So this is kind of how we felt after like 9 months of the experience.
We can all identify.
And then my last one is the buddy system. And my younger son just kind of likes to follow in his older brother's footsteps pretty much. And also like still in pajamas. This was probably at some point in an afternoon. He just likes to do whatever his brother's doing and follow and kind of be his shadow. And then I like all those posters on the wall are all of like, you can only be on the computer for schoolwork, you know, pay attention, do what your teacher's saying. Like these were all of our like school rules around trying to do school at home. So.
Well, and the measuring stick on the left is a great touch.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost gives it an Alice in Wonderland sort of miniature quality or something. It's very, this whole idea of domestic surrealism, you know, is definitely going on in your work.
Yeah, I'm very conscious about what is in the frame and what is that saying, or what is that adding to what the main thing that I'm photographing. So I do play around with that a lot. I probably take like this scene, for example, I probably took 30 pictures of it at different angles and different cropping. And then later when I review the images, I'm like, okay, this one is most telling what I felt in that moment. So.
And again, to date, you haven't felt any need to, if you're making 30 captures, you have not felt any need to composite, you know, take one figure from one capture, another figure from, you know, that whole sort of thing.
No, because I like to slant more on the side of like a documentarian type journalistic photography.
An actual moment,
Right. So I don't like to do any editing if necessary, if I can. I like to keep it as straightforward as I can.
Of course, the original perception is a massive act of editing, but I hear you. I get it, and that's a very impressive way of working.
Thank you.
So is this the fifth one?
Yes. Okay. Yep. That's all.
So are you still on this body of work? Where do you think you'd like, or do you have other ideas, or how do you think you might be extending this project?
Yeah, so I am still on this body of work. I probably have about 20 images that I really like with it, and I plan on just keep going. And because I let the moments happen, you know, it's just kind of some weeks I'll capture 1 or 2 moments that are fantastic, and it might be another 2 weeks before I capture another one. I just kind of live, and then I always have my camera accessible and a tripod accessible if needed. And I just grab it and I just make sure it's always charged and always enough space for more images. And I just grab it when I feel the moment, you know, calls for me to do that. So Yeah, I'm just planning. I've been working on a big body of work to just my own feelings on motherhood, and then my observation of my children throughout being their mom. So,
Yeah.
and just staying home together all the time.
Are there any existing bodies of work that have been inspirations to you, or is it more that you've been operating just out of the rich stew of your own environment?
I'll say that Sally Mann is like a huge influence of mine. I absolutely love her work. And I learned about her in college. So I don't know if that's kind of, planted the seeds early on to be like this. And I know she too tried to do limited. She did do a little more like, I guess I'll call it art direction with her
Shaping. Yeah.
photos of her kids. But yeah, she's that, and just like trying to contribute to the conversation of modern day motherhood. And another side of the work I'm doing is just the dingy grunt work of it too. I have a body of work I'm doing of that too, just the dirty dishes and the laundry and the constant cleanup. And because I think that's the side that we don't talk about and we don't value enough, the unspoken, unnoticed work that moms do. So I'm trying to help bring that to light and bring value to it. That I'm not, women shouldn't be seen as less than because they're just a stay-at-home mom. Like it is a lot of work to do. So.
Yeah, and anyone that doubts that is certifiable. Well, really fascinating body of work. I'm just astonished that you've only been out of the closet with this work for a few months at this point. So my real congratulations, and keep going. You're doing terrific, fascinating stuff. And we all would love to see where this goes,
Thank you.
what the next step is.
Thank you.
Terrific. And any other questions or comments from our distinguished panel?
I just want to say, I think you use line really well. Like in your second to last photo, the way his pencil is mimicking the staircase.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And color, like in the image that won, the use of yellow is really interesting. So yeah, I really enjoy these.
And I really like how you have this like hidden narrative always going on. Like when I look at the image, I'm always like looking past like just what the kids are doing. And even the one with the potty training, the fact that you're, I'm like intrigued that you're reading People magazine.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you're calm and letting just chaos happen and observing it. It's good.
Well, and one other quality that I hadn't really even thought about until you all were just talking is that there's this wonderful sort of anti-decisive moment idea going on in this work, because what you're recording are not sort of obvious peak moments of dynamic activity or whatever, but it's these what appear to be very in-between-ish kinds of moments, but it's the very in-betweenness that gives them the particular resonance. So the drama isn't physical or dynamic or whatever, but it's in, I guess it's in the richness of this overall narrative that's suggested. Does that make sense?
Yes. In fact, I love to use photography as the way to point out the things that I don't know if other people would pay attention to or notice.
Yeah.
These subtle little shifts or these subtle little dynamics going on that I notice, but I'm not sure that others will. And so my camera is a way to like, look at this. You see this happening, this subtle shift happening.
Right. Yeah, if something big in flamboyant is happening, no one needs to point our attention to it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's exactly these other kind of moments that are pregnant or rich with these narrative threads, but in and of themselves wouldn't naturally pull our attention, I suppose. And it's that
Correct.
realm that you're capturing, which is quite interesting. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Super. All right. So good luck. Keep it up.
Thank you.
And we have Karey.
All right. Do you want me just to tell you a little bit about myself?
Please.
I studied photography. I have my master's from the University of Utah
Oh,
in Salt Lake City. An interesting story is that my family lives in Georgia, so I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And right after grad school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like, I knew I didn't want to do commercial work. I knew I really just wanted to do fine art work. And so I got a dog and I told my parents I was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I hiked the trail until I got to North Carolina from Georgia. And I was just hanging out with my camera and my dog. And these two men came over and started talking to me. And they said, there's a private school in Atlanta that needs a photography teacher. They need someone to run an analog darkroom. And that was over 20 years ago.
Oh.
And so, I mean, I've never, the weird thing
Wow.
is like, I've never applied for a job. Things just kind of happen, which is really great.
Wow.
And so I teach full time in Atlanta at a K through 12 private school.
Oh,
And what I teach is analog and historic printing.
wow.
I do very little
Wow.
digital, even though now because of COVID, I'm kind of forced to have to do that. But I run a full functioning darkroom.
Oh, amazing. There aren't tons of them left. So
Mhm.
my hat's off to you. Thank you.
Yeah, and for any of you, like Laura, if you need chemistry, I've got the hookup for you. I'm really good friends with the owner of Sprint Chemistry out of Rhode Island.
Oh,
So
huh.
we should stay in touch
Yeah,
because
that's
I've used them for years and they're fabulous.
cool.
Wow. Yeah.
And so the other thing that I've gotten into, and it's like kind of this, I gotta really be in the mood, is that I've been playing around with wet plate collodion a lot.
Oh,
And so, but I have to tell you, it's probably the hardest process I've ever done.
yeah.
So I do play around with that quite a bit too.
Huh. Interesting. I've taken 2 daguerreotype workshops over the years, well, back in the 90s, and it was such a fantastic thing. But the only daguerreotypes I've ever made were, you know, with an expert right there. And I've never tried wet collodion, but I'm sure it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
It is, it's pretty magical.
Yeah. So you've been photographing continuously then for at least 20 years.
Yeah, and I feel like I've morphed my career in a lot of ways. Like for a while, I was a landscape photographer, and then I got tired of that. And then I decided to do a series on Southern culture. So I was then doing documentary work. So throughout my career, I've been shooting, but I feel like the subject changes, and maybe that's just with age, maybe it's with interest, maybe it's kind of, you know, I feel like as an artist, you morph into different facets of things that you know, feel compelled to want to document.
But in what you're describing, do you keep several different threads going at once, or are you all in on a certain project for, you know, a certain period, 2, 3, whatever number of years it is?
I'm in on it for
Yeah.
several years, and
That's
then
what I'd guess. Yeah.
and then there's some breaking point. Like
Right.
for me, when I was doing the Southern culture, and this was, like in the mid 90s, before like politics today, it kind of got dark. I mean, it really dealt with the Civil War and reenactors and rebel flags and the KKK. And there was a point where I was like, I'm just done with it,
Yeah.
and so right now I'm working on a very different series
Yeah.
that I started about 3 years ago.
Okay. And most of your work is medium format. You say you're analog, so you're shooting film. Are you working medium format, handheld, or on tripods, or?
Handheld. I shoot with the Mamiya 6, and I also shoot with a 4x5 camera.
Got it. Okay. All right. Good. Well, do you want to shift over to your 4
Sure.
or 5? I forget.
Let me go ahead and share with you guys. And let me hit present. Can you guys see this okay?
Yep.
All right. So I wanted to start with this image because this really kind of started this process for me. And the one thing I've discovered about myself is that I'm a very isolated photographer. Like I don't need anybody around me, and I prefer to not have anyone around me, because they're like, well, when are we going to go get coffee, or when are we going to go have dinner? And I'm like, yeah, but the light's so beautiful. Like I can't.
Or why don't you photograph this?
I know.
Yeah.
So I have a tendency to go very off grid when I photograph, and meaning like no internet, no cell phone service. And so the one place that I have a tendency to go to is Cumberland Island, which is an island off the coast of Georgia, which at one point was owned by the Carnegie family. And the interesting thing about the island is that there are wild horses on the island, and you can be anywhere and they just kind of show up. And this was just a really kind of a pivotal moment for me, where I just found this so majestic and beautiful. And I loved the shallow depth of field. And I liked kind of this gesture of the horse, that it really got me started with wanting to document more animals, but in a way where I'm very interactive with them, and kind of taking these private moments and spending a lot of time in the situation and really submerging myself within the context of what's going on. And it really, for me, is kind of that decisive moment. Like I kind of feel it when I'm photographing, that I'm like, this is beautiful, like I'm going to take this in, and this is such a great moment. So I do shoot a lot for shallow depth of field, which is really important for me. And this is the image, Keith, that you picked.
Yep.
And because of COVID, I travel a lot to Texas, because there are a lot of ranchers and there are a lot of really unique types of animals, and I can go on private property and spend a lot of time. If I need to spend 2 or 3 days, I can do that. And so this was taken in South Carolina at it's a couple where they rescue miniature stallion horses. And they actually dress them up as unicorns. And they have like this whole like kind of like playful storytelling concept. And it was just kind of an odd experience, but it was really beautiful. And it was one of these moments where they had a fire, like a brush fire going in the background. And it was just this amazing, like, give me smoke and fog and I'm totally in, like,
the thing is, your photograph is so much more poetic and mysterious than if that thing had a unicorn horn tied to its head.
I know. I mean, that was kind of hokey to work with, but there's just so many amazing, unique people out there that do really odd things. And I think I gravitate towards, meeting those individuals. And for me, I love the play of, the vines around like the face of the horse and how that framework and, it really just all came together.
The way the vines that are overlapping with the horse almost seem to be part of the horse. The collapsing of space there, I think, is really super cool. And I will say that when I first saw this, I had assumed you're using a tilt shift lens to play with the plane of focus. I hadn't realized that it was smoke, and that it's a much simpler optical thing than what I'd originally imagined. But still, there's this complete weirdness about what's in focus, what's not, what is space doing, et cetera, that is just terrific.
And so I started with this project, and I know you talked about compositing. I have a tendency to go to a lot of rehabbers that deal with animals from the South, and a lot of them have to do with mysticism and kind of this folklore. I'll get in my head, I'm like, I need to go photograph foxes in Minnesota, and I'll just go and do it because it's something that I have a vision about, and I want to try to capture it. So the background on this, and if you're aware of Georgia or the South, we have an invasive species that's called kudzu. And so I went out with my 4x5 camera and actually photographed with ortholitho film, which is a really great film because you can use it in a safety light environment, and you can load it in a safety light and you can process it in a safety light in trays.
Wow.
And then I worked with this owl for like 2 hours. And he's kind of an ambassador animal. A lot of these rescues will have an ambassador animal that you can spend time with. And so I really wanted kind of that movement of this owl in flight, but I wanted the context of the kudzu in the background, which for me is really kind of this analogy of overpopulation for these species, because kudzu is just like so out of control. And for me, a lot of times I just see areas that are overdeveloped, and I find it very disturbing to see where we're going in the future as far as being overpopulated. So I'm using kudzu as that metaphor in the images. But these are 2 images composited together, so I worked in Photoshop. So this, even though I worked with film, I did the composite in Photoshop.
Okay.
And then I have a rancher that I feel like I'm his granddaughter because I feel like I've moved into his house. But I had this vision that I wanted an albino deer, and I deal with a lot of deer rehabbers, and I'm really kind of drawn to genetic deformations with animals, which I think are beautiful. And so he has this albino deer, and I've photographed him ever since he was 2 months old. So here he is at 2 years old. And once again, I'm compositing with that backdrop to not only have that kind of ethereal backdrop, but I also am really quite infatuated with the backdrops from the turn of the century. I think that they are beautiful. And so I wanted to kind of put him in this timeless portrait, kind of treating him like you would a person, but identifying, this unique breed as, this kind of mystic animal.
So the backdrop you've chosen here, is that an old studio portrait backdrop?
No, it's a photograph that I took
Okay, got it. Thank you.
with the 4x5 camera.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, this image is kind of strange. It's like looking at it for the first time, it almost felt like a natural history museum or something. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a diorama sort of suggestion, but it isn't.
Yeah.
He's a sweetheart. I actually went in December to go see him again. And then this was taken in South Carolina, and this is a fawn, but the fawn is, they're called piebald deers.
Mhm.
And that is a mixture of a white-tailed deer and an albino together. So they have genetic deformations. So even though we're looking at the fawn, now that he has grown up, he's actually dwarfed and has a lot of hearing issues and eyesight issues, which you would imagine that you would kind of see with genetic deformation in nature. And then kind of playing off that dreamy backdrop.
And is the backdrop here a multiple printing or a multiple exposure of a real landscape?
Well, it was really interesting because the owner, all she does is fawn rescues in South Carolina. And so for some reason, she had this really very cheap velvet background where we see the tree in here,
Yeah.
kind of the woods. And she's like, let's put that up. And it was like, I mean, if you could, it was, if you could see the original, it's like real, it's like, I mean, it's like velvet looking. It's like kind of, and so I just worked with it and kept that backdrop that we put up, but then incorporated the kudzu within that.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating play between, nature, natural life, and complete artifice.
Mhm.
This weird sort of, vibration back and forth between those two poles that's happening here is wonderfully odd and compelling.
Yeah, and I kind of search for that. Like I kind of like the odd,
Yeah.
and people are like, well, where do you find this? I'm like, I just Google stuff. I find people, and then I call them up and, and I think for me, the beautiful thing, and I always encourage people that I feel like for me, I can produce this work, but I can also help to fundraise for a lot of these organizations that I feel strongly about.
Mhm.
And that's, that makes me feel good too.
Yeah.
So that's all I have to share.
Okay. So what are you working on right now, or what other ideas do you have in your mind for the near future?
Well, I mean, this is kind of odd, and I've actually learned a lot by like being with these breeders. Like I wouldn't, like 3 years ago, if you told me what a piebald deer was, I wouldn't know. So for me, I spend a lot of time. I'll spend hours with the deer alone, which is really quite magical, because you're like right there interacting with them. But every state is different. So I really like South Carolina because they are a state where you can rehab animals that carry rabies. So that would be like a raccoon, a coyote, a fox. So the one animal that I'm kind of in search of right now, and I'm really trying hard to get this woman to let me visit her, is she has an albino raccoon, which they are like really cool and funky. And so I really have like a list of all kinds of animals that that I really find unique. Later in the month, I'm going to Ossabaw Island, which is another barrier island off the state of Georgia. You have to go there by boat, and you have to be an artist or a writer to get on the island. But they have like really exotic donkeys, and it's just that southern kind of gothic overhang of trees, and it's very, very primitive. So that's kind of my next photo shoot that I have lined up.
Okay. Do Holly or Laura, do you have any thoughts or questions on the body of work we've just seen here?
I love how like fantasy almost they feel, and mystical, especially like these backgrounds that you're manipulating into the images. Yeah, they just have like this, such a mystical fantasy kind of, dream world sense to them. Yeah. I'm curious how you get the animals stay still for you to get them so sharply on a large format.
Well, I'm shooting the animals with medium format and the backgrounds with 4x5.
Okay.
But I'm gonna be fair to say, like with him, I'll spend 3 or 4 hours with him alone. And I can't have the owner with me because he's a male and the deer is a male, so he can be aggressive if it's during rut. But for some reason, he doesn't have any problems with me. And so I literally just sit and hang with him and kind of let him do his thing. But it's not an in and out process. I mean, it's time consuming, but for me, I find it really wonderful. I mean, who doesn't want to sit in an area with this deer who's really quite lovely? And the other, I think, benefit that I have is the fact, since he's albino, he has a really bad eyesight. So
it's like you're, I was gonna say, it's like you're building a relationship with them, right?
Yeah, and in fact, I'm kind of still editing some work that I photographed in December, where I went back to this particular location and to spend time with him. And his rack this year is beautiful.
There's something really profound and primal and really weird about interacting with and contemplating and connecting with a non-human intelligence. You know, it's, you know, the word, the word that I can't remember right this second. But this interaction with a non-human intelligence, I think, is, you know, something that's deep in every human brain, going back as far back as you can possibly go. But it's really elemental to the human experience and to defining the human, in contrast to perhaps, you know, this other complicated realm of intelligence. Well, I know we're just about at the hour mark here, but this has been really terrific, and I thank all three of you for the great work you've done and the privilege of being able to study it and learn from it. And we thank you for your time here this afternoon. That's been wonderfully eye-opening and I hope instructive for anyone else that's going to end up seeing this on what it means to be a picture maker. You know, what goes into the process of creating a body of work, and to recognize that every body of work is as individual as the maker, that no two of them are remotely alike. The core motivations perhaps overlap, but the result is totally individual, a product of all of these personal choices, personal ideas, visions, questions and all the rest of it. And it's a nice reminder of how, frankly, how complex and how rich and how important the art making process is. So my sincere thanks to all of you, and congratulations. And again, thank you so much for being part of the SAGE project.
Well, thank you,
Thank
Keith. You
you.
put a lot of time in this, and it's
Mhm.
really means a lot to have these get-togethers and to get to know you. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's absolutely been a pleasure, and I love seeing good work. And in this process, I saw a lot of good work, tons of good work. So it was a true pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. All right. Thanks.